Wide open paddocks. A secret waterfall. Endless Waterfall is a raw and sweeping New Zealand rural drama about love, loss, and loyalty. With the pulse of a thriller and the soul of a romance. Watch it like a movie. Feel it like real life. The novel by J. Pilgrim, Endless Waterfall. Chapter 7. Shadows in the Sunlight. By the time February rolled around, summer had settled deep into the land. The grass had faded to a yellow gold, the skies ran wide and open most days, and the hum of insects was constant, like a soundtrack the farm never bothered to turn off. The heat was dry and relentless, pushing sweat to the surface before the first fence post was even checked. For Joe, time had started to behave differently. Days weren't measured by clocks anymore, but by chores completed. Electric fences shifted, troughs filled, sheds cleaned, animals fed. Mornings belonged to the cows and the sound of suction cups and low bellows. Afternoons came with dust in his throat and sun on the back of his neck. Evenings often ended at the waterfall or the porch of the cottage, Lana by his side, her laugh weaving into the silence like it belonged there. He had stopped counting how long he'd been on the farm, because it no longer felt temporary. The days were hard and honest. Robert had him running irrigation lines and repairing broken fencing and teaching him to listen to the animals, not just look at them. "Cows tell you what's wrong if you're paying attention," he'd say, his voice gruff but patient. Same with people. And there was Angie, always busy with something. Chutney bubbling on the stove, washing on the line, or out gardening. She had officially made Joe part of her routine. She packed him lunch without asking, offered unsolicited opinions about his hair, called him love without hesitation. "You're too thin," she'd mutter on occasion, pushing a second helping onto his plate. "Farm boys need fuel," Joe would smile, too full to argue. Buzz, the sharp-eyed farm dog, had begrudgingly accepted Joe as someone worth his time. He now followed him from job to job, often riding in the tray of the ute, one paw hanging off the edge like a supervisor inspecting his underling. And Lana? Lana was woven into every part of his days now. Whether driving the quad across dry paddocks or sitting beside him in the Levin Cafe, teasing him over his awkward city boy beginnings, she was always close, always with him. They kept going back to the waterfall, too. Sometimes to swim, sometimes just to lie side by side on the warm rocks, sometimes to say nothing at all but fondle and kiss. The farm had slowed Joe down. Not dulled him, but sharpened the right edges. He had stopped running because, for the first time in years, he had something he didn't want to leave behind. Levin's Cafe had become their unofficial hangout. Joe had a favorite corner booth now, the same coffee order, and Gwen. Busty, blonde, and buzzing with energy, she made a point of stopping by their table every time they came in. Pouring a little too slowly, leaning just a little too far. "So, Joe," she'd purr, setting down his cup one afternoon. "Still working hard on that farm, or has Lana put you on light duties?" Lana rolled her eyes but smirked. "Careful, Gwen. He bruises easy." Joe grinned, sipping his coffee. "I'm surviving." "Thanks for the constant concern," Gwen winked. "Just looking out for my favorite farmhand." Lana leaned across the table once Gwen had sashayed away. "She's like a possum with wine gums," Joe chuckled. "She is relentless. She just likes shiny things." He met her gaze. "You think I'm shiny?" "No," she said with a soft smile. "I think you're really fine." The announcement. It was on a Tuesday evening. Sun still hot, cicadas still hollering, that Robert and Angie made the announcement. Dinner was on the veranda table, plates filled with meat and salad, a jug of cold water sweating on the table. "So," Angie said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, "we've booked a little trip." Lana looked up. "Where?" "Queenstown," Robert said. "Just a week." "Leaving next Friday," Lana blinked. "Wait, seriously? You two never go anywhere." Angie raised her eyebrows. "That's the point." 40 years running this place, I think we've earned some mountain air and overpriced wine. Joe looked between them. What about the farm? Robert pointed a fork in their direction. You two are in charge. Joe nearly choked on his drink. Us? You've been doing the work already, Robert said, voice calm. You'll be fine. Buzz barked once from the yard as if to second the vote. Angie patted Lana's forearm. Besides, the cow's like Joe now. Nancy hasn't tried to kick him in a week. Lana looked at Joe. He raised an eyebrow. Think we can do it? He asked. She leaned back in her chair, arms folded, eyes glinting. Of course. What could possibly go wrong? As laughter bubbled around the table and the sun sank further behind the hills, Joe felt it again. That strange, deep warmth. Not just from Lana's hand resting briefly on his knee under the table, or the sound of Robert's rare chuckle, or Angie fussing over whether the cottage fridge was working. It was the feeling of being trusted, of being seen as part of something, not a visitor, not a drifter, one of them. And he wasn't going anywhere. Officially in charge. The morning Robert and Angie left for Queenstown, the farm had a quiet hum to it, like it was holding its breath. Joe stood with Lana on the gravel driveway waving as the family car began its journey towards the main gate. Angie grinned behind sunglasses while Robert drove with his usual calm efficiency. You two don't burn the place down, Robert had called before driving off. Lana chuckled, arm linked loosely with Joe's. No promises. They watched the car disappear around the bend, then stood in the silence that followed. So, Joe said, turning to her, we're officially in charge of everything now. Lana looked up at him, her auburn hair tied back, a few strands loose and curling around her cheekbones. She wore a sleeveless button-down shirt knotted at the waist, dusty jeans hugging her hips, and old boots that had probably seen more mileage than the Hilux. Her skin was glowing in the morning sun, sun-browned and golden. You scared? She teased. Joe leaned down, brushing his lips against her forehead. Terrified, she grinned. Good, keeps you sharp. He looked around the yard. The cows lowing in the paddock, the scent of warm earth and hay thick in the air, Buzz sitting under the porch like a little sentry with his tongue out. This life had crept into him so subtly that he hadn't even noticed it settling in his bones. He was happy. And for the first time in years, content. Reminder of the past. Later that afternoon, they drove into town in Lana's truck. Windows down, breeze running through the cab, country music barely audible over the wind. They needed supplies, feed, gloves, more sunscreen, and ingredients for whatever Lana had planned for dinner. Joe offered to cook, but she'd laughed and said, unless you're hiding a degree in country cooking, you're on chopping duty. The New World supermarket in Levin was sleepy and familiar. Locals chatting at the entrance, kids leaning over the trolleys, the kind of place where everyone nodded at each other even if they didn't know your name. Joe walked beside Lana, his hand brushing hers now and then, letting her steer the mission. He wore an army green t-shirt stretched across his shoulders, black shorts, and clean sneakers Lana had insisted he needed. His hair was tousled, a few curls falling over his forehead, and his tan had deepened over the past month. He looked strong, more grounded than the man who had arrived with a bruised hip and no plan. They laughed over the price of tomatoes, teased each other over brand preferences, and tossed everything from cereal to dog biscuits into the cart. It felt domestic and easy. Until Joe froze mid-aisle, one hand on a packet of pasta. A man had turned the corner at the end of the row. Heavy build, shaved head, face like a boot that had been kicked one too many times. Neck tattoos disappeared beneath a black jacket. His eyes locked on Joe's, and something cold passed between them. Joe's jaw tightened. The man smiled. Slow and ugly. Bruiser. Lana looked at Joe, sensing it instantly. You okay? Joe nodded, his voice flat. Yeah, just. Let's move. Bruiser's eyes followed them as they moved down the aisle. He pulled a burner phone from his pocket as soon as they turned the corner. Somewhere in Lower Hutt, Wellington. Den sat in his office at the front of an old warehouse, surrounded by crates and peeling posters. He was stocky and 50, all business and menace, fingers covered in silver rings that tapped against the edge of his phone. Bruiser's voice came through, low and grimy. Found him. Where? Levin, with some bird. They looked cozy. Den leaned back, a slow grin spreading. That right, Bruiser continued. He didn't see me at first. But when he did, looked like he'd seen a ghost. Den lit a cigarette, smoke curling around his face. Follow him. Find out where he's staying. Don't get close. Yet. Just track. That prick still owes me. And his loyalty, Bruiser added. Damn right, Den growled. He walked away like it didn't mean anything. Like he could start over. He flicked ash to the floor. Nobody walks clean. Bruiser. Not from me. Someone I knew. Joe didn't speak much on the drive home. Lana noticed his jaw was tight again. That familiar weight had crept back into his shoulders. His grip on the steering wheel was firm. Too firm. She spoke gently. You seemed like you saw someone today. Joe nodded, eyes still on the road. Yeah, he replied. An old friend? She asked. He paused, then said quietly, someone I knew in Wellington. Lana watched him, sensing the walls going up again. Do I need to be worried? No, Joe said too fast. Then added, not sure yet. She reached across the seat, resting her hand on his thigh. Her touch was warm, anchoring. Joe looked at her then, and the tightness in his chest eased just enough to breathe. He wanted to tell her everything. About the debt, about Den, about what he'd done to get out of the gang scene. But not here. Not yet. Back at the farm, Joe stepped out of the ute and looked toward the horizon. The golden light of late summer bathed the farm in a kind of dream. Long shadows stretched across the paddocks, and the sky above the ocean off the Horo-Wenua coast burned soft orange, streaked with lavender clouds. The land felt alive, peaceful, like it exhaled with every breeze. Cicadas sang their dusk anthem. A tractor echoed faintly from a distant property. Buzz barked as they ascended the steps of the porch, tail up, ready to herd the world back into order. Later, after dinner, Joe sat with Lana on the porch of the workers' cottage, their bare feet propped on the old railing, a blanket draped over their legs. A half-finished bottle of wine sat between them, along with a bowl of Angie's spiced nuts and the dregs of a summer salad Lana had thrown together earlier. Buzz lay at their feet, half asleep but always watching. The evening was warm. Lana's head rested on Joe's shoulder. She wore a faded black singlet and soft flannel shorts, her skin glowing from the sun, her braid loose and frayed from the day. Her body leaned into his like she'd always been there, like there had never been a time when she hadn't. Joe's arm was wrapped around her, his fingers tracing small patterns along her upper arm. He wore a brown T-shirt, damp at the neck from the last of the day's heat, and a pair of cargo shorts that had replaced his old, ripped ones. His hair had grown longer, thick and unruly. Less city boy, more man rooted to land. I could get used to this, Lana murmured, breaking the quiet. Joe smiled, pressing a kiss to her hair. Think you already have. She looked up at him, her gaze playful but tender. The stories we will have to tell our kids. She paused and thought, hoping she hadn't assumed too much of him. Joe chuckled. Especially the story about the hylix in my hip. They fell into a quiet rhythm again, listening to the soft chirping of crickets and the occasional low groan of a cow settling in the distance. Joe's heart beat slower now. His mind wasn't racing. He hadn't thought about the past in hours. But someone else had. Bruiser watched from the edge of the property, parked under the cover of trees, his old green falcon camouflaged by bushes and the growing darkness. He had a pair of binoculars in his lap, a burner phone clutched in his hand. His lips curled in satisfaction as he saw Joe and the girl on the porch, close, relaxed, unsuspecting. He dialed. It rang once. Then Den picked up. "You follow him?" "Yep," Bruiser said. "Out on a farm, few K south of Levin, working the land. Living like a goddamn good boy. Got a girl too, cute, the kind who thinks he's changed." Den was quite a beat too long. "You got a description of the place?" "Big white house down a long gravel track. But he's living in a little worker's cottage just a tick from the main road. I'm sitting in my car, watching them now." "Send me the coordinates," Den said, voice flat. "We're on our way." Bruiser lit a cigarette, watching the smoke curl through the cab. "You want him alive?" Den didn't hesitate. "We want what's owed. And a little respect. He forgot who made him." "That's the problem." Bruiser smirked, looking at the small, lit-up porch, the glow around the couple. "Not for long," he mused. Bruiser knew Joe's kind. Running didn't make you clean. And debts don't disappear. Back on the porch, Lana pulled the blanket up over her thigh, turning her face into Joe's shoulder. "You've gone quiet," she said softly. "Just thinking." "About?" Joe hesitated. "About how I got here. How an accident got me this." She smiled into his skin. "Don't give the Ute too much credit. I picked you." That made him laugh, low and genuine. "Yeah, guess you did." But his eyes, now focused somewhere far off in the darkening paddocks, flickered with unease. He didn't know why. Nothing had happened. No sound. No sign. Still, something old was stirring in his gut. Something from a life he thought he'd buried. Hi. Stay updated on J. Pilgrim's releases by following him on this channel. Join a community of fiction lovers who are inspired, entertained, and transformed by the works of J. Pilgrim. Like, subscribe, and share this series. See you in the next episode.